Man, oh man, what do we have here? A 1960 model Chevrolet Corvette. Dual carbs. Oh yeah. What's going on, guys? Throws in a block back again in the garage with another C1. That's right, you guys saw one and here is another one. So this one's in for a wiring issue with the brake lights and the turn signals at the rear of the car. Also has an overheating issue when running down the highway. And a couple other things we're going to look into while it's here. It's going to be here for a short stay, so we've got quite the list to get through. We're going to go ahead and get to work. If you guys were wondering if you ever were, going to get three wheels of Corvette, this would be the one. Aside from a 63 to 66. This is my favorite body style of the first gen, in which we have something that I am infatuated with, the double tail lights, as well as the double headlights. I think that is just so cool. So cool. In order to get to the turn signal switch on this 61 Corvette, we're going to have to remove the steering wheel. So let's go ahead and get the steering wheel out of the way. That way we can take a look at the turn signal switch in action and see what's actually going on as to why the turn signals and the brake lights don't seem to be functioning the way they should. So I've got a turn signal switch assembly removed, and I'll go ahead and tell you what the problem is. This is a brand new part, but it's binding right in here where the rivets are pressed in. And what's happening is the cam or the return spring, which when you rotate it down, is supposed to push these things back apart. And when you go to rotate it counterclockwise to the left turn signal position, this cam should push out and lock into the rod, and vice versa down here on the bottom. And if these don't push out and engage, then you will have an overclocking issue, or you'll have non-engaging of the detent. So if this detent doesn't engage, you don't feel that, oh, it's on or it's off. So I'm gonna go through and rework this switch even though it's brand new, and do a little bit of massaging on here, and we will see if we can get it lubricated and loosened up enough to where it functions properly. I think the spring tension is strong enough. It's just that when this piece was actually made, it's clamped in there a little too tight, and it's not allowing the switch to oscillate in and out in order to engage the detents on the upper and lower portion of the turn signal cam. So I identified another issue here on the steering column itself. This is the lower roller cam for the turn signal switch. You see it moving there. And then this upper cam is not moving. It's bound up. So I'm going to go in here and massage on this cam and see if we can get that loose. That's essential for your detent to properly work when you have your turn signal switch in. So I'm going to do a little bit of massaging on that guy, and then we will see if we get smooth action both left and right turn. All right, recap on the steering column. Show what we found as to why the turn signals and the brake lights were malfunctioning. This spring in here on this brand new turn signal switch was improperly bent, so I went through and corrected the tension on this spring, lubricated this upper roller. It's hidden right back there because it was not moving, and you can see it's rolling now. It was stuck. And then the lower roller is also functioning properly. And we added the center return spring, which is here on the left hand side, and that's what returns you to center, like so. That took care of our issue with the turn signals and the brake lights. Let's get the steering column back together. I'm going to move on to the next thing. Got the steering column back together, checking on the coolant issue up here in the front, and the clutch, I believe, is possibly weak in the clutch fan, so I've put out an order for another replacement clutch so I can do a comparison there. I also did tighten up this serpentine, or tighten up the V-belt, because it was a little bit looser than it needed to be. It's a lot closer to, well, actually it's in spec now from what the drop should be. To determine that, you measure the distance from the height of the belt to the drop of the belt between the two pulleys. While I was in the engine bay, I discovered that I had a wire that at some point in time had gotten against the manifold. You can see there's a little bit of melted plastic right there. So that may have happened on this journey over here. But we're gonna go ahead and replace the loom or a portion of the loom on this wire because it's pretty mangled. And then I rerouted it on the other side of this speedometer cable, which was here, because the cable was on the outside and this wire was on the inside, and then the wire was down underneath the cable and it got up against the manifold. So we're going to reroute this so we don't have any other heat issues in the future. But just figured I'd show you guys that. Be sure to check all your wires in your engine bay, because this eventually there's going to be a fire or something not working. So let's go ahead and get that taken care of. Upon further inspection of this wire, this runs from the voltage regulator, which is located down underneath there, right there, up back around to a distribution point right back there. So we're going to replace that piece of loom from there all the way to the voltage regulator. Now I buy this stuff in bulk, as you can see, large quantity there. So we're going to go ahead and replace what we've got. Just keep this wire protected for the future. Should be long enough. And in case you are wondering, all of this is being done with the battery disconnected. That's just safety precaution so you don't accidentally shock yourself or set something on fire. I highly recommend that. Okay. Zoom in here so you guys can see this. Now I pulled the jacketing that was melted back off the conductor for the wire to make sure that the jacket itself of the wire wasn't damaged. This wire looks really good. So the wire loom did its job to keep the wire from getting melted or further damaged. So since that's the case, I'm gonna cut the rest of that plastic off of there that slid down here somewhere. Yeah, that piece right there. I cut the rest of that off of there. We'll put the new wire loom on. We're gonna tuck it up out of the way so it doesn't happen again, and it will be good to go. If you get in here and your jacket of your wire is melted, just go ahead and replace the wire. Don't take any time and try to splice it. Just replace it. Replace the whole thing, because once one's been heated, the conductor's been heated, it will draw more current in the future, and you'll end up in a situation where you've got a fire on your hands again, or worse. Wire's reloomed. We're gonna go ahead and tuck it up out of the way. All right, that wire is all wrapped up now, so it'll be protected in the future. Took the 61 for a test drive and found out that the upper carburetor gasket on this primary carter is leaking right in that area there. It only does it when it's at temp. So it starts to seep a little bit of fuel out of there. That means this upper gasket really needs to be replaced. The car is running really well, so probably just get away with replacing the upper gasket instead of doing a full rebuild, but you never know. I'll double check these screws to make sure they're tight up top and it's not just a loose screw somewhere, but I did discover that. Aside from that, ran the vehicle for approximately 30 minutes, did some driving around, and I have concluded that this fan clutch is probably, yeah. So I went ahead and picked up a new fan clutch. We're going to go ahead and install this. This one is, as you can see, a lot stiffer than the one that's on there. So we're going to install the new fan clutch to the fan, get it installed on the vehicle. We'll take it for a drive and see if that takes care of our coolant issue. I think that she'll be ready to go back to the owner. The only other thing that I discovered on the oil leak was that the oil pan is deformed, so that's going to probably be a replacement. You can take these off and reshape the bottom of the pans, which I would do if I had more time. But being that there are washers over top of nuts on the outside four corners, and I can see deformities in the oil pan, probably the best bet at this point is to replace it. Man, those dual quads, they do look good. Okay, new fan clutch is on. I went ahead and tightened up the fan belt. Again, it was a little bit loose. The screws in the top of the carburetor, the primary one, that's the one towards the rear, is your primary, they were a little bit loose. Not sure it was loose enough to cause that gasket seepage that we were seeing, but just snug those up a little bit. Hopefully that'll take care of the fuel leaking that we saw. It was pretty minor, but I think it's a bit more when you're driving down the road and the carburetor's under load, and it just kind of disappears when you get to idle because the fuel's evaporating. So with that said, we're going to take it for another test drive and see if our coolant temperature looks better than it was before. This is the driving position. The shifter is underneath my knee. So if you're tall, or you have long legs, you may want to reconsider. Because even with me sliding, this is all the way against the back of the seat. And there is some seat adjustment to right there. It's all the way back. You can go forward some. But yep, the seat all the way back. Reverse is literally under my knee. First gear is right beside the bottom of my knee. So a little bit tight. Steering wheel is right there between the legs. And foot on the clutch. You can see where my knees are at. They're almost at the bottom of the steering column. So, oh yeah. All right, the preliminary test yielded good. She definitely ran cooler than she did before. So we'll do another test tomorrow once the sun is up and do a highway test to make sure that we don't have any cooling issues. Pardon the music in the background. My amigos down the road are having a big party. Somebody's birthday tonight. So that's where the music's coming from. Yeah, so even with the door down, you can still hear the music. But anyway, the new clutch seems to be doing a better job. It actually ran about 165 around town and some low highway speeds around 55 miles an hour. Never did get up to 180, so that's a good sign. We'll see how she does with some higher speed on the highway to make sure we got the issue resolved. And then I think this one's going to be going back to its owner because we are out of time, and the only other things that need to be done are going to require more time than we have in 48 hours. So that being said, let's do one more test, and then we'll get ready to send this thing on its way. Man, this is a beautiful machine. So the verdict is, after another test drive and changing the temperature sending unit twice, the issue seems to be the gauge. So I've swapped sending units, and sometimes the resistance of ohms varies a little bit on the sending units, and it did vary. In this case, the gauge went hotter instead of cooler, which is definitely what not what we're trying to do. So because of that, I think that the issue is definitely gauge related and or wire related from the gauge to the sending unit. Something is causing the resistance to vary. I did notice backing the vehicle out of the garage at operating temperature, it was reading my temperature gun was reading 150 degrees. The temperature gauge inside the car was reading about 215. I backed the vehicle up about 20 to 30 feet, and the temperature dropped to 180. Now, there's no way that just, and when I say backed it up, I just had it at idle in reverse, foot on the clutch, easing out of the garage. There was no large amount of air being induced. In fact, the car was in reverse, so that tells me that is a resistance and or wiring issue. So that's a little bit more involved than what we have time to deal with. But I did go ahead and swap out sending unit just to make sure that wasn't the case. Seems to be an issue with the gauge and or the wire going to the gauge. So we'll have to be addressed at another time. So that's going to wrap it up for the 1961 Chevrolet Corvette. We took care of fixing the turn signal switch issue. There's some parts missing in the column, a part that was damaged. We got that taken care of. Also did diagnose the heating issue. We did swap out the fan clutch, which actually dropped the coolant temperature about 10 degrees, which was good. So it is where it should be according to the thermostat that is installed in the car, which is very important. So it's just a matter of fine-tuning the issue with the actual gauge itself. Also took care of rerouting a wire that was damaged by the exhaust manifold.
We did put a new wire loom on that just to make sure that it's well protected in the future. Also rerouted to get away from the heat source in which it got damaged upon. Oh yeah, we identified a fuel line issue. So the fuel line or fuel pump had been replaced and the fuel line was installed, and they tightened up the rubber hose last. I think I got a picture or two and put that on the screen. So the fuel restriction occurs under moderate acceleration. I won't say wide open throttle. Of course, I'm probably sure it's affected at wide open throttle. But if the vehicle's going up a grade, it does start to exhibit issues of fuel starvation. So that line will need to be replaced at some point in time. And the primary carburetor upper gasket is leaking. So that will also need to be addressed as well. Now, it only leaks when the vehicle is running, oddly enough. When the vehicle's sitting there, it doesn't leak at all. So when the fuel's splashing around in the bowls, that's when you're getting the fuel. I was going to wrap it up for the video on the 1961 Chevrolet Corvette with the 283 small block with 2 4-barrel Carter carburetors, a 4-speed in the floor, one of the most iconic dashes in the history of dashes, dream car. Waterfall between 2 bucket seats. I mean, come on. Can't beat it. My name's Erwin. This is Thrills in a Block. We're giving back our time. Let's take it away. We'll see you soon.